I am here on Christmas Eve. I love Christmas Eve shows. It's always been my tradition to do a lighthearted show and to have fun with the audience that is going to be going crazy throughout the day because it is the craziest day of the year for any family with small children because the kids wake up on a pogo stick and they don't get quieter throughout the day. They get spun up. Now, you might have to go to a Christmas pageant. I have no Christmas pageant on my bingo card this year. We do have a wonderful church service at 8 p.m. tonight. We don't do midnight mass in our mixed marriage, Evangelical Roman Catholic Presbyterian marriage. We do 8 p.m. service tonight. But we don't have a Christmas pageant, so I got that going for me. But I do, nevertheless, have to spend a Christmas Eve show on the awful thing that somebody did at the White House yesterday in Joe Biden's name. I'm going to get to that, to the commutations. And I'm not blaming Joe Biden. I don't think he's actually mentally competent. And that's my opinion based upon all the observation and the reporting. He really ought not to be signing anything except his resignation. Kamala Harris should be the President of the United States because we really don't know who is. And Edith Wilson land. I'll come back to that. I want to start, though, by reminding you that the land of Christ's birth has been in a war for 15 months. And that war continued yesterday in Gaza, and 3 IDF soldiers were killed yesterday in the Gaza Strip. Captain Ilya Gabriel Atedgi, who is 22 years old, captain at 22. Wow. Staff Sergeant Nathaniel Pesich, 21, from Elazar, and Sergeant First Class Hillel Diener, he's a reservist from Talman. They were all in the Kafir Brigade's Shimshon Battalion. They were all killed as the Hamas terrorists tried to regroup in northern Gaza. The mother of the dead corporal, the dead staff sergeant, Nathaniel Pesich, the 21-year-old, his mother, who is Rivital, asked yesterday, I really ask that if each of the people of Israel is willing to stop for a moment and close their eyes and see if there's anyone they hold a grudge against or disagree with, simply call them and tell them in memory of the hero of Israel, Nathaniel Pesich, I am willing to move one step, take off one piece of clothing, meet with you, and give you a hug. I passed that on. Aviv Reddy Gore posted that because it's a wonderful sentiment. It's a grieving mother, and she is asking her grief to redeem other people's dysfunction in their family or among their friends or as a result. I mean, Israel's politics are as bitter and as broken as our politics are, and there you have the mother of a slain soldier giving out a true Christmas thought. Gaza, by the way, almost certainly had to have been the area through which the infant Jesus, his mother Mary and Joseph, his stepfather took him in the flight from Herod after the wise men did not return to tell Herod of where they had found the child in Bethlehem. So Herod figured out he was snookered and he would go on to murder all the innocents in Bethlehem. And the church remembers their martyrdom in the new year. But the Feast of the Holy Innocents is what it's called. But in Gaza, the war goes on this Christmas Eve. There is no truce. And I thought I would begin that way. Now I want to go to, I am increasingly upset. Not decreasingly. Normally I get decreasingly upset. Increasingly upset with whoever decided that we would commute death sentences for 37 people. And the stories are beginning to come in from the ABC News. Victims and family react as Biden spares the life of 37 federal death row inmates. And they're not reacting well because they were not consulted. They were not spoken with. And the people who are saying this is a great thing are not the people who lost a loved one at a terrible killer's hands. Biden death sentence commutation reprehensible, says Virginia victim's father. So local Virginia news last night reported on one of the victim's fathers. Biden commutes death sentence for Philadelphia drug lord who killed 12 people, including children. So these stories are just starting to show up. This was on Channel 6 up in Philadelphia. President Joe Biden on Monday announced, he didn't announce anything. We didn't see him. We got a piece of paper. That he's commuting sentences of 37 of 40 people on death row, including a Philadelphia drug lord who is convicted of killing a dozen people. All right, a dozen people. Family members of the children who died. Remember, this guy ordered a firebombing of a house that killed a young child. Family members of the children who died are devastated. This includes Tina Fox, who told Action News she's disappointed in the president. Many of Fox's relatives were murdered at Savage's direction at a home on North 6th Street in 2004. The crime is beyond violent. They were children, she said. They would have been adults now, but they didn't have a say. You can't hear their voice. They were killed. And this is what people are saying across the board. I got a chance. I got blessed. I got to be on Special Report last night, and Brett came to me first to talk about this, and I got to say it. Cut number 5.
Okay, Hugh, thoughts?
It was an outrageous and incoherent exercise abuse of presidential power, Brett. The victims' families will be heard from, I hope, in the coming days. But there is no coherent distinguishing between the 37 murderers, and they were very awful crimes, and the 3 that President Biden left on death row. Now, I doubt the president is competent. I really do not believe he's in a position to sign anything except his own resignation. But if he is going to defend what this outrageous act is, he ought to come out and take questions on it. There are Department of Justice regulations that allow for victims to be heard. They were not followed. It's an abuse of power, and the collapse of his reputation continues apace. And it just is, they don't care. I don't know who is driving this bus, the Politburo around Joe Biden. We know Dr. Jill Biden is part of it, but I think Dr. Jill Biden came up with let's commute 37 out of 40 people. It's so stupid. I mean, if you want to come out and say, okay, I said I was against the death penalty, it's hard for him to do, because this is Joe Biden in 1994, cut number 7.
I'm a death penalty supporter. I'm the guy that wrote this bill. Presumptuous thing to say, but I wrote this bill. My own little hands. And I added into the bill more than 50 death penalties. I support the death penalty. This president supports the death penalty.
That was 1994, so it's 30 years ago. But, of course, people change their minds. It's okay to change your mind. He ought to come out and explain that, but he can't because he's not competent. You know it, and I know it. He physically can't do it. So he ought not to be wielding the pardon power. Brett came back around to me, and we're talking Panama Canal and President Trump negotiating posting again. Cut number 6.
Hugh, your thoughts about this? Obviously, he's doing a number of things, saying a number of things. Greenland, Panama Canal.
He's serving notice that he's back, Brett, and he does do a lot of this sort of machine gunning out of different issues. But the problem with the canal, of course, is the Chinese Communist Party owns a company that is running some ends of the canal. I think the president is negotiating via post again, which he is known to have done in term 1. I do want to go back to something that was said about the commutations. I don't think we'll see Joe Biden out there. If he comes out, I'll take it all back. But I don't think he is competent to be doing anything right now, and they are torching his legacy, Brett. So Donald Trump's kind of helping Joe Biden by giving people something else to talk about. But Joe Biden, I think Robert Hur called him an elderly man with a poor memory. That's going to end up being the best thing that's said about him at the close of 2024, given how bad this White House is cratering. I just want to pause on this. The White House does not care because they don't care about Joe Biden. It's been elder abuse for a long time. But they don't care about what history is going to record. He's ambling around the White House, being bodied, to use the term of art, by a coterie of aides who won't let him near a microphone because he can't talk. So we have a constitutional crisis. We have a 25th Amendment to deal with things like this. And the victims' families, I'm going to read you a piece by Andy McCarthy when I come back. The victims' families, according to the Department of Justice regulations, had a right to be heard by the pardon attorney or someone before a commutation was issued. None of that happened. Some Prague kid decided this was a good idea, and then some Prague kid said, well, we can't pardon the Boston Marathon bomber or the killer at Mother Emanuel or the killer at Tree of Life. I got it. That's the ticket. We'll say those are hate crimes. Well, when you get into the details of the other 37, they're hate crimes too. It's simply not coherent. He ought not to be president. You know it, and I know it. And he ought to get out of the job, and they ought to stop embarrassing him by doing things he could not do if he were allowed to try and do them on his own. But Christmas Eve is a wonderful time for most families, and there is a tradition in almost every house. The Polar Express somehow sedates Genghis Khan. I don't know how it works, but it works. So I've always thought it was a creepy movie, but it works from about half of my grandkids. The other ones are too young to worry about a Christmas ritual yet. But if you're 5 and older, you got to have a Christmas ritual or you'll never get to sleep, and a Christmas Eve ritual, and that's theirs after church. Now, you might be driving somewhere, and I have to talk about the unfortunate acts of abuse of power from the White House yesterday, and some of them involve details, which if you've got kids in the car, I'm sorry. The National Review's magnificent Andy McCarthy, and one of the podcasts you should listen to, and I tell you every day you should be listening to commentary, to Call Me Back, to the editors, to the McCarthy Report, to Getting Hammered, to the Megyn Kelly Show, to Dwayne's World, to Highly Concentrated Hugh. I probably forgot one in there. Three Martini Lunch with Jim Garrity. There are about a list of 10 podcasts you can be smart. One of them I never miss is the McCarthy Report, because Andy is that smart, that good, and very direct and measured. He wrote about the commutations yesterday morning. Last week, as we covered here, the Biden Department of Justice filed a death penalty charge against Luigi Mangione, the alleged cold-blooded killer of health insurance executive Brian Thompson. Mangione was already facing state murder charges for the murder committed on a Manhattan street. The only reason to pile on a capital charge for an administration that says it is philosophically opposed to the death penalty and has imposed a moratorium on execution since President Biden entered office in January 2021 was to grab headlines in a case that riveted public attention. Now, just a few days later, after charging Mangione with the death penalty, Biden has cynically commuted the sentences of almost all remaining federal death row inmates, 37 of 40, so that none of those defendants will be executed. Now, I note Biden didn't do it, but Andy knows that too. Biden, I want to continue with Andy here. This is Andy. I say cynically because this is the game Biden and Democrats in power play with capital punishment, which is broadly popular nationally, but reviled by their party's progressive base. For public consumption in murder cases that enrage voters, they take on the mantle of capital punishment's reluctant champions. Thus did the Obama-Biden Justice Department indict Dzhokhar Tsarnaev on the death charges when he and his brother bombed the Boston Marathon in 2013, notwithstanding that Obama, like Biden, had imposed a moratorium on executions. And when a Democrat appointee dominated First Circuit Appellate Court irrationally reversed the death sentence endorsed by the Boston federal jury, the Biden Justice Department appealed and convinced the Supreme Court to reinstate it. That's the Biden Justice Department. But that was out of one side of the administration's mouth. On the other side, Biden and Attorney General Merrick Garland were assuring their political base not to pay any mind to these theatrics because, after all, they weren't going to allow anyone to be executed. And naturally, Tsarnaev is one of the 3 death row inmates whose sentence Biden did not commute. The others are Dylan Roof, the white racist who in 2015 murdered black worshipers at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, Mother Emanuel, and against whom the Obama-Biden Justice Department sought the death penalty, despite its claimed constitutional qualms, and Robert Bowers, the Jew-hating murderer who killed worshipers at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, and against whom Biden and the Justice Department decided to proceed with death penalty charges in 2023. The Democrats' death penalty cynicism aside, this is a corrupt invocation of the pardon power, Andy notes. I should say yet another corrupt invocation by Biden. First, he used it on behalf of his son after indignantly vowing to the nation repeatedly that he would do no such thing. along the way avoiding the admission that he was complicit in the influence peddling that resulted in tax charges against his son, shamefully claiming that Hunter Biden had been selectively targeted for prosecution. Next, he issued a record raft of clemency acts. Now, Biden has done something similar, and in its own way, more unseemly, on death sentences. Read the whole thing from Andy. He goes on to tell you, and I want to predict as well, he's going to do more. But it's not him. He's not competent. He shouldn't be doing anything except leaving. You and I know that. 1-800-520-1234. Give me a call. And remember, come January 13th, I'm moving my show to the afternoon. If you miss me in the morning, you can always go get Highly Concentrated Hugh at iTunes, at Spotify, or the Salem Podcast Network. I hope your travels today are safe and that wherever you are, whether you're out on the West Coast or it's bright and shiny, not briny, bright and shiny, or you're way up in Maine where it is freezing cold and the rain is coming down. I'm worried about my pals up there, George and Brian and Tony. They're not equipped for this kind of weather. They're softies. And I'm wherever you are, have a wonderful Merry Christmas Eve and a wonderful Christmas, but do go about your travels carefully as the weather dictates. I go back to the scandal of Joe Biden doing anything. It had been my hope that after the decisive repudiation of Kamala Harris, that Joe Biden handlers, because I don't believe the president is making any decisions, that his handlers would keep him out of sight and out of mind and maybe not remind the world that our president is of limited capacity. I don't know that there's any way to reverse anything that he does, although there are means in the state courts when elder abuse occurs and someone defrauds a senior with limited capacity of their money or their home or their benefits, there are ways for guardians to be appointed and to go and reclaim the cash or the home or get them out of a bad situation. But you got to get a guardianship established. And there are ways to then go back and attack transactions that occurred. They take a long time. I don't know, I've never even thought about it, whether or not a presidential commutation can be reversed on the basis of the president's incapacity. You'd have to prove the incapacity. It would require some kind of a hearing. And I don't know who has standing to bring a hearing about one of the commutations. I know who's angry. One of the killers that was left off had killed a prison guard. And if you don't have a death penalty for killing prison guards are defenseless against people who are serving life sentences. So there is always a good reason to have a death penalty, and I am not a fan of the death penalty. I am not. The Catholic theology teaches that shouldn't be an option, and there are better alternatives, but I am also aware of the realities of people who take care of our corrections facilities, and because largely we're very active with prison fellowship. I knew Chuck Colson. I followed prison fellowship for years. We are still, to this very day, working on Angel Tree. There's a banner at the top of HughHewitt.com because prison fellowship will work probably the busiest day of the year is today. They've got to deliver presents for Christmas Eve, for Christmas morning from mom or dad who are in jail, and you can help. They'll keep doing the list. They'll go down the list as far as you can, and maybe you meant to send in $30 and you forgot. Please go and do that. I got busted yesterday. You know, the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I have a no gifts policy, and I usually break it, and I try and break it close enough to Christmas that she doesn't know. We have one American Express account, one checking account. I don't have a withdrawal card at the bank because I really don't like banking and doing all that kind of stuff. She has always run the finances. So we have one American Express card. I got a backup card for please don't take American Express, but it pops up whenever you use it. So I waited till she was out of the house doing something, and I went Christmas shopping, and it popped up, and she got mad at me because we're not supposed to buy each other a present. But you know, guys, I'm here to tell you, never don't buy your spouse a present no matter what they say. So I got in trouble for buying the present, and then she'll probably take it back. I hope not. I like it. I'll tell you about it next week because I'm taking off Thursday and Friday. Tomorrow we have a special show. Our friend Larry is going to pop in here, O'Connor. You might remember him from the days where I taught him everything he knows about radio. Larry O'Connor has done a special for Fisher House, which is a wonderful organization that houses the families of our wounded warriors when they receive extended care at one of the various facilities that take care of our veterans and our wounded warriors. So Fisher House is great. We're doing that show tomorrow. The Fisher House show will be tomorrow on Christmas. And then Ed Morrissey's sitting in for me on Thursday. Dwayne is here on Friday. I'll be back next week. We got to get ready to move. There's lots to do. By the time I talk to you next after today, I'll be in Studio West, Relief Factor Studio West, and I'll be out there for 4 months. I'm teaching this spring and looking forward to it. And I got to teach them about presidential power and the 25th Amendment, which, of course, has never been used and was passed in the aftermath of Edith Wilson hiding her husband's condition from the country for 18 months, I think it was, in 1919 and 1920. And what we have now is Joe Biden hiding in plain sight. He's ambulatory. Right? That's what we can say, is he's ambulatory. And there are a lot of old people who will be going over to a lot of houses on Christmas. Who's still in the Navy, Dwayne, from the Chevy?
Aunt Bethany.
Yeah, so we got Aunt Bethany, President Aunt Bethany right now. And
is Rusty still in the Navy?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's Joe Biden right now. And do you think people understand President Aunt Bethany?
Oh yeah, I think everybody knows.
Wait a minute. What was that look?
What look? This would be my Griswold jersey.
You are ready to go.
This is from Christmas Vacation.
Don't you embarrass your random people living around the house?
No, and I'll tell you what. You know where this jersey came from? Joy.
Not Cleveland.
Joy gave me this.
Well, she's a wonderful lady.
Yes, she certainly is, isn't she?
She's a wonderful lady.
Good luck with that. Yeah, where are you going to go with that fella?
I don't know. All I know is that you gave me an idea. We are trying to watch Christmas movies we've never watched, and I've never watched Christmas Vacation. Do you think that's a good Christmas Eve movie?
When did you join the Houthis?
We've never watched it.
Why?
Because you're
because I watch it, you don't?
You watch it too much. I've got to balance out the universe.
Okay, so here's the deal about it. It is a movie where every single element in a traditional family, every personality type, and the conflicts that happen with all those personality types are represented in this movie.
Well, Aunt Bethany is President Biden, don't you think?
Absolutely.
You have some firecrackers.
No, Bethany, those are Christmas lights.
Don't throw me down, Clark.
I'll try not to, Aunt Bethany.
Is
this the airport, Clark?
We're here.
Oh, that was fun.
I love riding in cars.
You know, Joe Biden and Aunt Bethany have a lot in common. Do you think they let Aunt Bethany pardon anyone? Do you think they let Aunt Bethany cook the turkey?
Aunt Bethany wrapped the cat as a Christmas present.
Yes, I know. I know that. People need to know Christmas Vacation is Dwayne's favorite movie. And Skinny Dwayne, by the way, did Joy buy you that before or after you lost 50 pounds from my
She bought this for me about a week ago.
Oh, okay. So? She made that choice consciously and she'd known you and...
Absolutely.
How long have you been married?
6 years.
She gave in after 6 years?
She adores me.
Can you stand up again and show people the back of that? That is really something.
Well, I got to do this because I don't think the camera can see it. Can you see it?
Griswold. Now tell me, whose jersey is that?
This is a modified Chicago Blackhawk jersey, except hockey.
Why?
Because they're from Chicago. The Griswolds, the original, the original vacation movie. They started from Chicago and they worked their way west to Wally World. So the front of this actually has the Wally World emblem on it.
I
You
gotta
never saw
say,
any. You never saw the vacation movies because.
no, I'm not a vacation movie person, but I am a my PhD
How do you know
weight
if you
loss.
haven't watched it?
You're stepping on your sponsor's line. MyPhDweightloss.com is the program Dwayne endorsed, used, and lost 50 pounds with. 864
644
1900. That's
864
644.
1900.
Did Joy buy you a smaller size?
She did.
She what?
She did.
And so Clark Griswold is, in your mind, you.
No. Well, actually, partly, yes. I'm more competent than he is. I'm more handy than he is. I'm not as clumsy.
Do I get an analogy from this movie?
Yes, you are the you are the boss that they kidnap at the end because you're a Scrooge and you took away Christmas presents.
Very nice. But I will just say Aunt Bethany came to mind sua sponte. I was not aware that you were wearing the Griswold jersey this morning. And I would ask everyone who's listening to the podcast, you can only imagine. You've got to go to YouTube to see it because it's
quite something, isn't it?
It's quite something. And I salute Joy's taste in Christmas presents.
There you go.
She did better than I did.
Boy, you ended up a lot different place than you started, huh?
864
644
1900. That's myPhDweightloss.com. Playing this music for David Drucker, my guest from the Dispatch, because it is a theme song in Black Doves. Have you watched that, David Drucker?
I've started it. I haven't. I got a ways to go, but I did get it underway.
So we've got Black Doves on this hand, which the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I are deeply invested in now, 3 hours in, and Christmas Vacation, Dwayne's favorite movie ever, which he wants me to watch tonight because it's Christmas Eve. Should we watch more of Black Doves or should we watch Christmas Vacation?
Well, if I left it up to my children, we would watch Christmas Vacation yet again because it's become a perennial favorite.
David, I've never seen the movie, and I'm not sure I want to get drawn in. It sounds to me like it's kind of an addiction.
It is actually. It just becomes something you start. It's just like one of those classic movies where you start reciting the lines on your own, and you're like, wait for this part, wait for this part.
It took a long time for me to escape the Fratres Libertas guys calling me Ralphie from A Christmas Story, so I'm not sure I want to throw myself into becoming the boss at the end. David, on a serious note, I want to turn to the White House decision to commute 37 death sentences. I was on Brett Baer last night. This is what I had to say, cut number 5.
Okay, Hugh, thoughts?
It was an outrageous and an incoherent abuse of presidential power, Brett. The victims' families will be heard from, I hope, in the coming days. But there is no coherent distinguishing between the 37 murderers, and they were very awful crimes, and the 3 that President Biden left on death row. Now, I doubt the president is competent. I really do not believe he's in a position to sign anything except his own resignation. But if he is going to defend what this outrageous act is, he ought to come out and take questions on it. There are Department of Justice regulations that allow for victims to be heard. They were not followed. It's an abuse of power, and the collapse of his reputation continues apace. So I got to ask you, David, who do you think made this decision?
Listen, Hugh, I don't know, and I haven't done any reporting to try and figure that out. All I will say is that the decisions that Biden has made, both the initial pardons and these pardons, don't surprise me based on who he has been as a politician over the last 40 years. I think a lot of Americans on both sides of the aisle, for different reasons, have been coming to similar conclusions about pardons, which is that this awesome power vested in presidents by the Constitution has been abused or overused or misused. And I think this is going to be a topic of conversation for people in the coming years. It's just I feel like there's been an acceleration of the use of the pardon power. But I don't know, to answer your question directly, I just don't know.
Okay, so here's a judgment question. Would you leave an 82-year-old like Joe Biden alone in a busy mall for 3 hours?
Well, I might. It just sort of depends. Look, I know what you're getting at here, um, and I think one of the interesting things about the topic about his competency is that throughout his presidency, I really haven't seen decisions made that were out of character for the kinds of positions he held or decisions he said he would make over the years. There's been really nothing that made me, I
Well,
mean, maybe
let me
one or
play
two
for you. I'm,
decisions.
I'm not playing Get You David. I want to play for you cut number 7, though. Here's cut number 7 Dwayne dug up.
I'm a death penalty supporter. I'm the guy that wrote this bill. Presumptuous thing to say, but I wrote this bill. My own little hands. And I added into the bill more than 50 death penalties. I support
David, no, it's not really Joe Biden.
Maybe it's not, but Joe Biden always wants to be in the center of his party, and his party has shifted on the death penalty over the years. And so again, not completely out of character, maybe with who he was at one time, but the party was also different at one time because the party in the Clinton era had moved to the center.
So
And
here's my,
and the,
my big question for you, David. And I might keep you
yep,
over the break if I can.
sure.
Whose books do you want to read about this White House? Who's going to write a memoir that really tells us what happened? Because he can't. I don't think he has the capacity to write a memoir.
Yeah, well, the Wall Street Journal reporters that have done a really good job of chronicling um, the White House, his condition, um, and who he was surrounded by and the decisions they were making. I mean, that's what I would read first.
Like Ron Klain and Jeff Zients, maybe. If Joe Biden, she won't tell us the truth. I just think they're trashing his reputation by doing these sorts of things. Stand by, David, because I want to ask you about the White House press corps in the wake of the Wall Street Journal story. Media tried to turn me into a story yesterday. I'm not calling for the closure of the White House press corps. I'm calling for the replacement of everyone who failed at their job for the last 4 years in the White House press room. And I know that Jackie Heinrich and Peter Doocy did their job, but a whole bunch of people did not do their job. David, have you ever held a White House correspondence press pass so that you can go in and out
No,
of the press room? Okay, neither have
no,
I. So,
I've been a Capitol Hill reporter, but not a White House reporter.
so people covet those jobs. They are a ladder that you have to climb up a rung if you want to move up in the world. And since they've been televised, a lot of people have used them to get, they're ready for their close up, sort of Sunset Boulevard. Did the White House press corps fail in light of what the Wall Street Journal report last week told us?
Yeah, it's sort of known as the worst beat you can't refuse, just because of how controlled it is. Look, I think we all could have done a better job of reporting on this White House based on things that we know now, particularly thanks to a lot of the reporters of the Wall Street Journal, and that includes myself. And I think again, a lot of the decisions that the president has been making, or if you prefer to say decisions that have been coming out of the White House, again, from my perspective, were not out of character for who Joe Biden was. And I include the bad decisions here. This is not, oh, look, he made he made good decisions. They weren't out of character. There were some decisions you could characterize as good, many you could characterize as not so good. They all made sense from the perspective of who has he been over the last at least 20 to 25 years, but maybe even longer. And so there weren't, from my perspective, a lot of head scratching moments. But what we have learned clearly tells us that collectively, whether you were in the White House or not, and sometimes being in the White House almost hamstrings you possibly, we didn't ask enough questions. We didn't demand enough access. We just simply didn't do a good enough job trying to ferret out this aspect of his presidency.
So, would it be fair for Team Trump to arrive and say to all the media organization, you're all dismissed, you may reapply, and we're going to have a White House press corps. I don't want to shut down that, but we're going to not issue a press badge to anyone who failed completely in the last
No,
term.
no,
And
my
I,
opinion is
I,
no, because It's not up to the government to decide whether the press is doing a good or bad job. It's simply not.
Well, yes, it
Now, look,
is.
Trump,
The White House belongs to the president.
right?
He
He can.
doesn't
The
get to
president,
control.
yeah, the president can refuse people access to the White House because that's his right. But if the metric here is you didn't do a good job, that's he can have any opinion he wants. All right. The press gets to do whatever it wants. If I'm denied access to the United States Capitol, I have a badge for that, right? And if they decide we don't think you're good at your job, we're not letting you in, I guess that's their right because they control access. But the U.S. government doesn't get to decide if I'm doing a good or bad job.
Of course
Because once
not.
you get
I
into
teach
that,
constitutional law, but they do control the physical access to the White House,
right?
and
But
they
I don't
can
like the
simply
metric.
say,
I don't like the right, but I don't like the metric. Then they should just say we don't like you because we don't like you. I mean, I prefer
no.
them to just be
The
honest.
idea is who actually failed. I know that Ducey pushed repeatedly,
Yeah,
often
but you
being
can
rebuked by Jean Pierre,
right,
but I don't
and
know of anyone else.
yeah, but you can then talk to other people and they would have a different opinion. It's all subjective. That's my point. Is
His
if they
mental capacity is not subjective. This is my point. This is an objective evaluation. I objectively know we need a White House press corps. I objectively know a lot of the people in there simply absolutely failed in their
yeah, but if
in
you
their crucial mission.
right, but reporters fail all the time. Listen, I mean, I include myself in failing to ask enough hard questions and dig deeper at times for certain stories. So under that metric, I should be refused access if I want it, if that's the metric.
No, you didn't cover the White House. You weren't
So yeah,
there.
well, maybe not. Yes, correct, but I still think that I could have done better. That is my point.
Well, you and
But
Chris
again, it's
Saliza,
about
I don't. I did well. I actually called this out 3 years ago because maybe I've had the disadvantage of having four parents die, in-laws and parents, and watch them age. And there are obvious things, David, and I don't want you to have to defend the whole White House press corps, but would Trump be justified in saying, send us a different team? This team
no,
failed.
because then it's the well. And listen again. This is all subjective, but once a media outlet responds to an elected official who says we don't like who you sent us, send us somebody else, this is a slippery slope that I don't think that we as journalists can go down. We simply just have to do a
But,
better job.
the White House press room didn't even exist until in the
I'm not
recent
saying it
decade.
needs to exist. Listen, I'm not saying it needs to exist. I'm not saying that they need to talk to us, right? I mean, they talk to us so much as they think voters want to hear from us. I don't think they necessarily have to be transparent because a White House has political and policy interests. They're not there to tell us everything they're doing and thinking. But if the
No, they're
question
not.
is, but right, and I'm okay with that, right? I mean, if voters are unhappy with that, then things like that would then change, and they would give us more information if that's what voters demanded. But my point is, if the question from you is, should Trump refuse entry to the people that have the badges and tell all of the media outlets, send me other people, that becomes the sort of collaboration with an elected official that I don't think journalists can be a party of,
I
right? I mean,
do
if,
think.
listen, Hugh,
I
if
want
a,
just
if a
characterize
news,
what my
if
proposition
the
is simple.
White House told Fox News, we don't like Ducey, we think he's unfair, send us somebody else. I don't think they would
That's
comply, and I don't think they
That's their right. They'd have to take the political heat for that because it's all a public decision. I would make
correct.
a very public statement to the world. We love the press. I'm Donald Trump. I do daily press conferences. I talk to everyone. I talk to Theo Vaughn. I talk to Joe Rogan. I talk to Hugh Hewitt. I'm Donald Trump. I don't care who's in there. But these people failed to tell the American people what was going on for 4 years. Send me new people. You have your badges. There is no more White House Correspondents Association in charge of the White House. I am not going to let bad journalists, and by that I mean those who are poor at their job, keep coming back and borrowing the credibility of that room because that's what they do.
Listen, that's a point of view. I'm just saying that if journalists cannot allow elected officials to govern how they operate, for good or ill,
Of course
they
not.
can't.
No one tells me what to do,
I wouldn't.
and no one tells you
Listen,
what
Hugh,
to
if
do.
listen, if I was in charge of a media outlet, theoretically, I might consider whether the White House beat needed fresh blood based on the past few years. The minute a president told me I'm not going to accept who's there. Send me somebody else. I wouldn't do it on principle.
This is why I would do a blanket exit for everyone, because then you don't single out anyone in particular. But we're going to have to disagree, David Drucker, on Christmas Eve, except on the necessity of watching Christmas Vacation. You have a great Christmas, David, and I hope to talk to you in the new year. Thank you, sir. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Morning Glory. I'm Hugh Hewitt, reminding you, come January 13th, I'm moving to the afternoon, 3 to 6 in the East Coast, driving people home from work, noon to 3 out west, and anytime, on demand, at any place that you get a podcast, you can get Highly Concentrated Hugh. If you're used to me in the morning, you can still just download the night before's podcast, which will post every night, and you'll be able to start the morning with me because nothing really happens between 6 and 6 anyway. This is the way I get more deeply into the middle of the news cycle. Drucker hung around with me. David M. Drucker of the Dispatch hung around with me, and we talked about the White House press corps and its abject failure during the Biden years. Here's the rest of our conversation. So I'm back with David Drucker, who is senior political writer for the Dispatch. David, have you ever held a White House correspondence press pass so that you can go in and out of the press room? Okay, neither have I.
I've been a Capitol Hill reporter, but not a White House reporter.
So people covet those jobs. They are a ladder that you have to climb up a rung if you want to move up in the world. And since they've been televised, a lot of people have used them to get, they're ready for their close-up, sort of Sunset Boulevard. Did the White House press corps fail in light of what the Wall Street Journal report last week told us?
Yeah, it's sort of known as the worst beat you can't refuse, just because of how controlled it is. Look, I think we all could have done a better job of reporting on this White House based on things that we know now, particularly thanks to a lot of the reporters of the Wall Street Journal. And that includes myself. And, I think, again, a lot of the decisions that the president has been making, or if you prefer to say decisions that have been coming out of the White House, again, from my perspective, were not out of character for who Joe Biden was. And I include the bad decisions here. This is not, look, he made good decisions. They weren't out of character. There were some decisions you could characterize as good, many you could characterize as not so good. They all made sense from the perspective of who has he been over the last at least 20 to 25 years, but maybe even longer. And so there weren't, from my perspective, a lot of head-scratching moments. But what we have learned clearly tells us that collectively, whether you were in the White House or not, and sometimes being in the White House almost hamstrings you, possibly, we didn't ask enough questions. We didn't demand enough access. We just simply didn't do a good enough job trying to ferret out this aspect of his presidency.
So would it be fair for Team Trump to arrive and say to all the media organization, you're all dismissed, you may reapply, and we're going to have a White House press corps. I don't want to shut down that. But we're going to not issue a press badge to anyone who failed completely in the last term. And
no, my opinion is no, because it's not up to the government to decide whether the press is doing a good or bad job. It's simply not.
Well, yes, it is. The White House belongs to the president.
Right.
He doesn't get the control.
Yeah, the president can refuse people access to the White House because that's his right. But if the metric here is you didn't do a good job, he can have any opinion he wants. All right. The press gets to do whatever it wants. If I'm denied access to the United States Capitol, I have a badge for that, right? And if they decide, we don't think you're good at your job, we're not letting you in, I guess that's their right because they control access. But the U.S. government doesn't get to decide if I'm doing a good or bad job.
Of course not. I teach constitutional law. But they do control the physical access to the White House.
Right, but I don't like the metric. I don't like the metric. Then they should just say, we don't like you because we don't like you. I mean,
the idea is who actually failed. I know that Ducey pushed repeatedly, often being rebuked by Jean Pierre, but I don't know of anyone else.
Yeah, but you can then talk to other people and they would have a different opinion. It's all subjective. That's my point.
His mental capacity is not subjective. This is my point. This is an objective evaluation. I objectively know we need a White House press corps. I objectively know a lot of the people in there simply absolutely failed. in their
Yeah, but if
in
you
their crucial mission.
right, but reporters fail all the time. Listen, I mean, I include myself in failing to ask enough hard questions and dig deeper at times for certain stories. So under that metric, I should be refused access if I want it, if that's the metric.
No, you didn't cover the White House. You weren't
So yeah,
there.
but well, maybe not. Yes, correct. But I still think that I could have done better. That is my point.
Well, you and
But
Chris
again, it's
Saliza,
about
I don't. I did well. I actually called this out 3 years ago because maybe I've had the disadvantage of having four parents die, in-laws and parents, and watch them age. And there are obvious things, David, and I don't want you to have to defend the whole White House press corps, but would Trump be justified in saying, send us a different team? This team
no,
failed.
because then it's the well. And listen again. This is all subjective. But once a media outlet responds to an elected official who says, we don't like who you sent us, send us somebody else, this is a slippery slope that I don't think that we as journalists can go down. We simply just have to do a better job.
You know, the White House press room didn't even exist until in the
I'm not
recent
saying
decade.
it needs to exist. Listen, I'm not saying it needs to exist. I'm not saying that they need to talk to us, right? I mean, they talk to us so much as they think voters want to hear from us. I don't think they necessarily have to be transparent because a White House has political and policy interests. They're not there to tell us everything they're doing and thinking. But if the
No, they're
question
not.
is, but right, and I'm okay with that, right? I mean, if voters are unhappy with that, then things like that would then change, and they would, give us more information if that's what voters demanded. But my point is, if the question from you is, should Trump refuse entry to the people that have the badges and tell all of the media outlets, send me other people, that becomes the sort of collaboration with an elected official that I don't think journalists can be a party of. Right?
I do think.
Hugh,
I want just characterize
what
what my proposition is simple.
White House told Fox News, we don't like Ducey, we think he's unfair, send us somebody else. I don't think they would comply, and I don't think
that's their right. They'd have to take the political heat for that because it's all a public decision. I would make a very public statement to the world. We love the press. I'm Donald Trump. I do daily press conferences. I talk to everyone. I talk to Theo Vaughn. I talk to Joe Rogan. I talk to Hugh Hewitt. I'm Donald Trump. I don't care who's in there. But these people failed to tell the American people what was going on for 4 years. Send me new people. You have your badges. There is no more White House Correspondents Association in charge of the White House. I am not going to let bad journalists, and by that I mean those who are poor at their job, keep coming back and borrowing the credibility of that room, because that's what they do.
Listen, that's a point of view. I'm just saying that if journalists cannot allow elected officials to govern how they operate, for good or ill.
Of course not. No one tells me what to do, and no one tells you what to do.
Listen, if I was in charge of a media outlet, theoretically, I might consider whether the White House beat needed fresh blood based on the past few years. The minute a president told me, I'm not going to accept who's there, send me somebody else, I wouldn't do it on principle.
This is why I would do a blanket exit for everyone, because then you don't single out anyone in particular. But we're going to have to disagree, David Drucker, on Christmas Eve, except on the necessity of watching Christmas Vacation. You have a great Christmas, David, and I hope to talk to you in the new year. Thank you, sir. I will be bringing, I hope David makes the move with me to the afternoon. In fact, I've had our booking producer making calls to all of our regular guests, trying to figure out what works for them in the afternoon. Because I've been broadcasting for years now, early in the morning, inside the Beltway, in California, in Maine, and now I'll be broadcasting in the afternoon, inside the Beltway, at lunchtime in California, afternoons up north. Because I live in 3 different places. I move around the country. I don't like to be in the Beltway all that much. The Beltway is a weird place. You don't actually see what the rest of the country sees when you're in the Beltway. You talk about stuff the rest of the country doesn't talk about. It's not good for journalists to be here year-round. It just isn't. And it certainly isn't good for them to go back to the White House press corps after they have failed. And they have comprehensively failed. You see, I don't think David was understanding, or we were playing a version of the game that the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I have, which we learned from her grandmother which is perhaps you're right. When you're having an argument with your spouse and you know that you're right and your spouse knows that they're right, the only thing you can do is say, perhaps you are right, which really means you're wrong, I'm right, but we're not going to persuade each other. Let's move on. That's what the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I have learned after 43 years of marriage. Perhaps you're right. And perhaps David's right. He's not right, though, and you know he's not right. What do you think? 1-800-520-1234. The White House Press Corps, the White House Press Room, was built in 1970 by Richard Nixon. There are 49 chairs in it. Those 49 chairs should not be legacy admissions. We're down on legacy admissions, right? We don't want any legacy admissions at Princeton or any place where they used to do legacy admissions. We don't want that anymore. They're terrible. I don't want legacy admissions at the White House. I can find you 49 people who will say BS to Karine Jean-Pierre instead of going along and nodding and listening to that nonsense for the last 4 years. Playing this music because I'm Hugh Hewitt, and I mentioned earlier a new Netflix series called Black Doves. And I want to make sure that I warn everyone, it is an NC-17 Christmas show. So it is set in London. It is set at Christmas time in London. It is violent. It is adult themed. It has a lot of nudity. It has a lot of violence. And it's a fabulous thriller. So there, you have been fully warned. I've done my declaration. Black Doves is a brand new Netflix series that is fabulous. The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt genuinely does not like violence, but she loves this show. Part of it is Keira Knightley's in it. Part of it is Q is in it. And by Q, I mean the fellow who played, his name is Ben Whishaw. And he played Q in the Bond movies, and he is sort of the anti-hero. But I just think it's a fabulous movie, and there's a role in it much like the handler of the Russian spies or the Soviet spies who were deep agents, if you remember that lady. It's got so many great roles, and it's shot in London in Christmas time, so it's very much a Christmas series. But it's sort of like the Die Hard movie on steroids. It's that bad. So if you watch it, you watch it. Now here's my question. 1-800-520-1234. You heard what David Drucker and I talked about. I want President Trump to empty out the White House Press Corps and dissolve the White House Press Association and say, news organizations, you can now apply to the press office for a credential. You get a one-day credential, and we will give them out depending on who we like. We might use bingo cards. We might draw them out of a hat. But we're not putting your name plate on a chair anymore. We're well past that now because you so abjectly failed. And David objects that that's interference with the press. No, it's not. The White House doesn't belong to the press. It belongs to the people. It belongs to the president who occupies it. They have control over the space. There was no press room until 1970 when Richard Nixon boarded up the swimming pool and put the press room there. And there are only 49 chairs. And then there's more space downstairs. And there are, look, Salem Network, we got a great guy over there. Fabulous, terrific guy. The White House Press Correspondents Association used to do a good job. They don't anymore. They don't. They all failed. They failed miserably. And the consequence of that failure is somebody is issuing commutations without anyone noticing. Someone pardoned 1,500 people. It's not Joe Biden. You know that, and I know that. Joe Biden is not making these decisions. And the Democrats should be madder than anyone at the press because they covered up for Joe long enough so that when it became too hard to hide, he had to drop out. Remember, former and future President Trump was a guest on this program when Joe Biden issued his debate challenge, and Donald Trump said in real time, sure, I'll do that. I'll do that. You bet. I'll be at CNN. And then on June 27th, Donald Trump walked out, and then Joe Biden shambled out, and it became obvious to everyone that he had lost his mental acuity. That he's just, the sun setting is going on. And it could be long twilight. I'm sure he has good moments. He does not have the capacity to decide to commute 37 death sentences to life imprisonment and leave 3 aside. Somebody else made that decision. Somebody else did that. And that condition of the president was reported by the Wall Street Journal last week, but we've all known it for a long time. 1-800-520-1234. Should we close the White House press office, at least for a while? In the meantime, as you're calling, 1-800-520-1234. Open the phones, Harley. On Christmas Eve, drive safely wherever you're driving today. Good luck at the airports. The Financial Times, airlines see busiest Christmas season on record. Goodness gracious. I feel bad for anyone trying to fly anywhere today. Just be patient. Now, I have a fairly robust social media presence. You can follow the Hugh Hewitt Show on Facebook. You can subscribe to my podcast, Highly Concentrated Hewitt, iTunes, Spotify, Salem Podcast Network. I am all over X, and 250,000 people follow me on X. But I don't think I've ever had a response to a post on X like I did yesterday. Yesterday morning I wrote, who thinks Joe Biden actually made these decisions, actually reviewed the files and weighed the justice of such a sweeping nullification of judges, juries, victims, and their families involved in these cases? 567,000 people viewed that. I don't think I've ever had 567,000 people view that, except for my abrupt departure from the Washington Post. And it's because I think people are genuinely outraged that he did it. And I also believe they agree with me about the failure of the White House press ought not to be rewarded. Dave in Columbus, I want to start with you because you give me a chance to also mention that the SEC got blown out of the horseshoe like they were a peewee league playing against the NFL. That was kind of sad for the SEC, wasn't it?
I guess in a way, but Tennessee's still a good ball club. They're not chopped liver, but that was a great victory, and let's hope it just keeps carrying over because I want the Ducks real bad.
Yeah, I saw the last time the Ducks played the Bucks in the Rose Bowl. I was there, and I'm thinking about it right now. Probably not going to go, but I might because I'm going to be back in California, and the Ducks are going to eat the Bucks for lunch. That's what I think.
Hey, they're not chopped liver either, so it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it, so we'll find out.
So what do you think about this White House press corps?
I'm with you 100% on that. We as the American people have a right to know the physical state of our president. That's we just have that right. And the legacy media have been covering for him for, his whole term. And it's just a crying shame because we do have that right. It's that
we do. And there's no other. Now, journalists are not professionals. All right. They're craftsmen. They're like painters. There's no journalist, no painting school that gives out a badge that says you're an official painter. You either are good at your craft or you're bad at it. And we know bad painting when we see it. A lot of people do bad painting, and we know good painting, and we know amateur painting, and we know professional painting, and we know that. The same is true with journalism. They've done a bad job collectively for more than 4 years. A really bad job. They haven't had any help from the front of the room either with Jen Psaki or Karine Jean-Pierre or John Kirby, but they've done a bad job. My position is that they all ought to be relieved of duty. Is there any other position in the world where you can be as bad at your basic job and keep your job?
In this day and age of DEI and all that stuff, it goes beyond journalism. That's for sure. That's scary.
Yeah, that's true. And you can't a lot of people get to keep their job, but not White House. There are only 49 chairs in that room. We got to find 49 real journalists. Thank you, friend. I'm not against journalists. I just want competent journalists who will simply say, Karine, I'm leaving. You're not making any sense. And by the way, the president appears to me to be incapacitated. You are called upon to have opinions every day. You make judgments every day. Kevin in Moreno Valley. What do you think, Kevin?
Hey, morning, Hugh. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
I heard you discussing this, and I think you're right. You sweep the decks, you put all the names, or all the names of the reporters in a fishbowl from all the outlets. You draw the names out, you assign the chairs by that draw. Every 6 months, you sweep the decks again. You get people in there who've been there for decades, and they think they have a right to be in that chair in the press room. You don't have a right.
I also want to tell you something, the dirty little secret of Washington. Access has been monetized by maybe 100 people. All right, so
Yeah,
I've got lots of good access when the Republicans are around, but I don't monetize it. I don't put out a daily newsletter that I want people to subscribe to in order to find out what's really going on. Monetizing access was not the idea of the press room. The press room was supposed to be about telling the American people what's going on in the White House, and it doesn't. It's not that anymore.
No, it's not. It's an old boys club, and you fit in, and you get there by seniority, and then you have the number 1, 2, 3, 4 chair, whatever. But sweep the decks, and from CNN, okay, that's great. Take everybody who's in the Beltway. You're out. Sorry, you can't be here for the first year. CNN goes and gets people from, I don't know, Montana.
Atlanta. They got a lot of good journalists in Atlanta. There are a lot of great journalists all over the country who would love to be able to do this. And you know what the proof is? The proof is Brett Baer. Do you know how Brett ended up being Brett Baer? He was a local reporter in Atlanta who got called up by Fox News to cover the Pentagon, and he got there, I think, on 9/10, the day before 9/11. And Pentagon reporters are the best reporters in the country because they can't get anything wrong, and they're dealing with people's lives, and they have to protect operational security, and they're dealing with serious people whose lives are on the line. They're the best reporter, and Brett brought that professionalism when he replaced Britt at Fox News Channel, which is why he's the best in the business. I would bring all the Defense Department reporters over to the White House. We might have known something about Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. The reporters think they're there and they work and they report for their outlet. No, you're there to represent you and me and John down the street and Susie in Montana. That's who you're there to.
Well, not Susie in Montana. We don't really like Montana. Come on. Wait. The Wild Adventures there. I'm saying that because Jan Janur is my friend, and I hope someone scholarships a young man age 21 to 35 to the Wild Adventure, TWA.US. Look for the young guns. I got to move on. Kevin, thank you. I want to talk to Mark in Minnesota. Mark. Boy, do you have a bad governor.
Oh, you can say that again. Holy cow. I almost wish he had won just to clear the decks here.
Can I tell you a little inside radio story? The guy, Chris DeGaulle, who is replacing me in the mornings, Chris is a wonderful guy, but I had never met him. I'd only heard him. And I met him when we went to Philadelphia together, and he did the best Tim Walz impersonation I have ever seen. I was laughing. I said, this guy will be great in the morning because you guys, how did you elect him?
It's the entire 7-county metropolitan area. He lost outstate. If you get out of the 7-county metropolitan area, it's like getting out of the Beltway. If you just get out of that particular area, you see a different world.
Yeah. Your world is unfortunately governed by that guy. Tell me a little bit what you think about the White House press corps.
Well, to a certain degree, I think you're both right in the sense that David is basically saying that the White House should not be able to choose the reporter. And in a sense, that's true because the reporter is just a proxy of the news organization. They basically represent the news organization. The news organization is complicit, not the reporter. They're just the proxy. On the other hand, you're right in the sense that you've got to clean that house up. They owe the press nothing.
Well, yeah. So would you go to a doctor's practice where everybody died?
No.
I mean, it's like there's there are 49 surgeons here. One of them, Ducey, or two of them, Jackie Heinrich and Ducey, they deliver their patients at the end of the day and they're still alive. The other
47
kill them off. I mean, would you go to that practice? No.
Well, no. But and I would hope nobody else would.
Well, that's what we've got, and some of them are my friends. You've heard Peter Baker on this show. You've heard Michael Shear on this show. I am afraid they have failed. I do not know why they failed, but they failed. And the Wall Street Journal has the receipts. Everybody knew, and now he's out there commuting death sentences, and I'm sitting here saying he shouldn't be signing anything except his resignation. Thank you, Mark. Let me go to Beaumont. I love Beaumont. Marty, how are you?
I love Beaumont, too.
You have no idea how many hours I have spent in Beaumont. Back in my land use day, you know where Potrero is, right? Potrero Valley was 10,000 acres owned by Lockheed, and they wanted to develop it, and they were done doing rocket testing, but it was covered with Stevens kangaroo rat and had a plume of dirty jet fuel. It put my kids through college. I love Beaumont, but it meant I had to drive out there and attend endless city council meetings in the old high school. I got to tell you, that drive home at 1 o'clock in the morning is no fun.
Oh, you ought to see the new veterans memorial they put there. It's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, okay.
Hey, I have to agree with you completely. They need to get rid of all those people. Let the news networks choose who they want, but they need a new gang in there.
That's what. Again, I'm 100%. Just everybody's gone, and nobody gets an assigned seat. We're going to draw the. We're not. We don't care about CBS, NBC, ABC. They don't even have half the audience of the commentary pod. CNN does not have half the audience of one podcast, much less my audience with millions of people. I don't want to go to the White House, by the way. You don't learn anything there. There's no reporting to be done there. The only reporting you do in town is when on the phone or in person with someone who knows something that they're willing to tell you off the record or on the record. There's nothing happens at the White House. It's a complete and utter waste of reportorial resources. Hey, thank you, my friend Marty. Love Beaumont. Merry Christmas. Another Marty. This one in Pennsylvania. Are you a Steelers fan or are you an Eagles fan?
I'm actually a Dolphins fan.
No, I'll let you stay then. Okay.
Hey, good morning, Hugh. Merry
Good morning.
Christmas. Happy
Merry
Christmas,
Christmas to
however
you.
anybody celebrates. It's a beautiful day here in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Are you in Erie? Oh, no, you're in Northeastern. You're in
Northeast.
Scranton.
I'm in
You're-
the Northeast. Honesdale,
Yeah, you-
the birthplace of the American Railroad.
Yeah, you're almost in New Jersey.
Oh, well, almost into New York.
Have you
But,
seen
listen,
any UFOs or any drones or anything like that?
Yeah, locally we've had a couple, but I think it's not as bad as Jersey. I think they're just local people.
The obvious
who saw
explanation is it's the invasion of the body snatchers, and they've decided to adopt the New Jersey motif. Those people
there
aren't
you
really
go.
New Jerseyans anymore.
I agree, but I agree that I do not believe that Joe Biden is making these decisions
Of course
in
he's not.
Washington. I honestly believe that there's a core of people who are trying to create as much chaos before Trump takes over.
I don't know what they're trying to do, but whatever they're trying to do, they're very bad at it. Because all they're doing is destroying Joe Biden's reputation. I'm going to come back and talk about that. In the meantime, if you want to go to the inauguration, America, don't forget, just text the name Trump to, I forgot the number, 94878. Text Trump to 94878. We're giving away one trip to Washington, D.C. for two people with 2 tickets to the inauguration, 2 tickets to the inaugural ball. Let me tell you on this Christmas Eve, all right, this is a reality check for some of you. There are in prison today in the United States 1,230,000 adults. 1,230,000 adults. They have hundreds of thousands of children from whom they will be separated tomorrow morning. Because of this audience and the Salem Media Drive that is sponsored every year by Angel Tree, 15,000 of those children will receive a present from their mother or father tomorrow morning. And we can add to that today because Angel Tree is that good. If you contribute today, we can do another gift and another child on the list. 15,000 is great, but I'd love to do more. 15,000 kids, a lot of kids who will get some Christmas tomorrow. That's 15,000 Bibles that go into their hands, 15,000 presents like footballs or Barbies or whatever they wanted that their mom or dad in jail okayed, and then their mom or dad has written them a note. And those notes get delivered if you come through. And I want to thank you for all of you who have done so and those who are going to go over to HughHewitt.com right now, find the banner, and send a gift. What'll be interesting, you know, Mike Gallagher always beats me in these campaigns, and it's because he has an unfair advantage. I have to drive people to work in the morning on the East Coast, but the signals aren't so great out on the West Coast. You have to listen through static or listen online. Beginning on January 13th, when I moved to the afternoons in the East and noon to 3 in the West, some places will tape delay, I will be on a level playing field with Gallagher finally, and I'll finally be able to punch his lights out. Rhetorically speaking, I love Mike. Mike, of course, is taking this week off because Mike has got to attend to his 7 condos. But I am here to tell you, please be generous to Angel Tree. Mike might have given up on Angel Tree, but I haven't. You can also call 888-206-2764. Let me check the markets brought to you by American Federal. Now, I bought gold for the fetching Mrs. Hewitt yesterday. She knows that. And not a Krugerrand, that's not very Christmassy. But she'll find out what. And it was expensive because gold this morning is trading at $2,629 an ounce. But you know why? If you buy gold for someone for Christmas, it's never, ever, ever going to be less than what you paid for it, minus the markup. Why? Because for more than, I shouldn't say that, never, we could get hit by an asteroid or something. But for the past 100 years, gold has more than kept pace with inflation. So I like to give gold to people because you're also giving them, should bad things ever come, here's something that will endure. I like to give the grandkids a Krugerrand or an Eagle or a Maple Leaf occasionally, not this year, because they can't spend it. And they look at it and it kind of amuses them. Then they're mad at me because they can't use it for anything. They can't spend it. They can't, and they're not allowed to buy video games anyway. So I don't know why they're mad at me. But they have to save it. I mean, it's kind of a pain in the neck. But if you're going to sell gold or you're going to buy gold, do it with Nick Grovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. Fed, Coin, and Bullion. I've been doing this for 40 years. And you can call them today. All right, 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. If anybody listening knows Stephen Means, who is a 5-star reporter for Cleveland.com, and he's funny and he's smart and he hosts Buckeye Talk, there's only one problem with Stephen's game. One problem. He gives the number so fast that new subscribers, people who've fallen upon Buckeye Talk because of a referral, don't know how to sign up because he runs through the number. You have to slow it down. So if you want to buy gold today, and you want to tell someone I'm buying you gold and I'm giving you a gift card and you'll be getting a Krugerrand soon, 1-800-221-7694. Or maybe you're at the end of the year and you haven't got any money. And you've got to sell the jewelry that you got last year. Sort of a Magi's Gift O. Henry story. Do it with Nick. Get a fair price. He buys gold as well. 1-800-221-7694. Evie. Evie is in Finger Lakes, New York. You know, Evie, I'm so glad. How cold is it in the Finger Lakes?
Oh, I just got about 8 inches of snow, and yeah, it's finally warming up today to like 32 or something.
You know, I always keep track on it because if I ever get in trouble and I need to be bailed out, the guy I'm going to call to get bailed out runs Hobart and William Smith College. So I got to get him to come from the Finger Lakes.
Yeah. So I had a thought on both the press and the death penalty, and I don't know why they just can't use a bigger room for the press. I mean, that's a pretty big. The White House is a pretty big establishment. They could use any room in there make a bigger press
Well, they
room.
have the press conferences in the East Room, but the press room isn't going to, there's no place to put the press room. They ought to just close it down, in my view, and put them out in the driveway, erect a tent. They're so bad at their jobs, I don't know why they get to be comfortable. And these are my friends. They're going to be mad at me, but they're just that bad at it. Evie, if you want to say more, don't go anywhere. I just got to go to the next hour. Stand by. Have a blessed and wonderful Christmas and a happy Hanukkah to our Jewish friends. I have a question for you, and then I'm going to get to the phone. If the phone rang, the chain of command in America runs from the President of the United States to the Secretary of Defense to the combatant commanders and on down the line. If Lloyd Austin got a call from Joe Biden today telling him to attack X, we are going to preemptively strike X because they're going to bomb the United States, and then hangs up, do you think Lloyd Austin would follow that order? The answer is he shouldn't. He should call up Jeff Zients, the chief of staff. He should call up Tony Blinken. He should call up Jake Sullivan. Are you guys aware the president just told me to attack X? and then they would meet and confer and decide what to do because they know the president is incompetent. Given that, how is he competent to commute death sentences? He's not. He's not. Who is telling him to do this? Who is allowing him to do this? Who isn't aware of the damage they are doing to his already very shaky place in history? I think he's probably the worst president in American history. The Afghanistan collapse, the worst moment in American military history, followed by the deaths of 13 soldiers, the death of hundreds of Afghans, the collapse of Afghanistan into the Taliban's hand, followed by the invasion of Ukraine, followed by the Hamas attacking Israel, the failure of deterrence against the Houthis they continue to fire at. And we have 3 dead soldiers in Jordan by an attack from Iran earlier this year. We've got a couple of dead SEALs in the Arabian Sea under Joe Biden's watch. It's apparent he doesn't even know that. And they thought they were going to run him again. These people are so arrogant, they thought they were going to run him again, that they could get away with it. These people are whoever is running his life right now, because he clearly is not. And I think you would agree with me. You would not leave Joe Biden alone in a crowded mall for a couple of hours and say, I'll see you later, Gramps. You wouldn't do that. You would not do that. And he's making these commutations. So, A, they're very bad. B, Joe Biden's place in history is being ruined by idiots who surround him. And then 3, the White House press corps just failed. I mean, abject failure on a professional level. They're not professionals. They're not credentialed by anyone. They're craftspeople, and they are not very good at it. They're like bad painters. Almost everyone in that room. And they ought to empty out, tilt it sideways, empty everyone out, collect the badges, start over. And then assign the seats. I mean, I don't know how you're going to let the 45 people in or the 50 people in. It should not be legacy admissions. I'm now against legacy admissions. I've gone full DEI. I'm against legacy admissions, especially in the White House press room. Dump them. Get Ben Shapiro a seat. Get the pod save. I'm not ideological. Go get the pod bros. Give them a chair. Go get Ben Shapiro. Give him a chair. Let him assign someone. Just decredential the people who failed so abjectly. Evie, you're back. I cut you off earlier, Evie. Keep going.
Hi, yeah. So I was thinking about the death penalty, and to put the nail in the coffin, as it were, on the way we do the death penalty in the U.S. is that we are doing an eye for an eye. It's Old Testament, but if we're using Christian values, then Jesus would have given these people the rest of their lives to contemplate their acts and repent.
You might be right, Evie. You might be right. But the Constitution of the United States clearly contemplates the death penalty. The Supreme Court has weighed in again and again. It is completely constitutional to use the death penalty. You might be opposed to it. I might be opposed to it. Joe Biden did not run on commuting death penalties. He, in fact, sought the death penalty this month for the killer of the healthcare executive. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Not at all. Can we do a cease and desist order on this guy? He really should resign. Because, the world is not asleep. Bad things are going on around the world. People are trying to kill us, and he's not in a position to make decisions. And he's not making decisions. You and I know that. And it's a sham, and it's a scandal. Thank you, Evie. Mike in Wisconsin. Good morning, Mike. How are the cows?
The cows are cold this morning, Hugh.
Just checking.
No, Lloyd Austin, to answer your question, would not follow that order because even the Democrats and the leadership of the Democratic Party and the leadership of the White House know that Mr. Biden has not really been the president. The outrage, Hugh, is not as you've so well expressed over the last few days. It's why haven't the Democrats been so unconcerned about having a president who's basically, non-functioning? It's because they don't really think that the chief executive or Article 2 is very important at all. To them, the president is the administrative state, the unconstitutional fourth chapter of the Constitution that really doesn't exist. The president is merely a figurehead, and he would not follow that order.
Right. He's reigning. He's like a constitutional monarch. And the government is running of itself, but unfortunately, the government doesn't run of itself. Decisions have to be made. He could just sit there for 30 days get to the Capitol, smile, wave, and go to Delaware. But he's not. He's making decisions, and they're not even pretending anymore. He's not talking to anyone. He is ambulatory. I guess that is their test. If he can move from point A to point B, no matter how many people help him or how long it takes him, we're not going to declare him incompetent. I'm astonished they haven't been around many seniors who are ambulatory and lack competence. But you're very, very right. Let me go to Vincent in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hello, Vincent. What say you?
Hello?
Hello.
Vincent, St. Paul, Minnesota. Thank you.
Hello,
Merry
sir.
Christmas.
And to you.
Thank you. To deter crime, maybe they ought to do what they did in the Old West. Don't hide the death penalty. Put it in a public square and hang them.
No, I'm not for that. That's cruel and unusual punishment. However, I'm not for this guy making any decisions about who lives and dies. I'm actually not pro-death penalty, but that's not up to me. If you have a death penalty, if prosecutors seek it, and juries deliver it, and judges uphold it, I do not understand commutation. I just don't. Hey, Randy in Knoxville, Tennessee. Hey, Randy, how are those volunteers doing this week?
Hey, congratulations. I'm married to a Buckeye, so,
Oh, you had a good week.
Easy here.
I haven't heard from Schroeder in like a week because he adopted the whole volunteer thing and put on the orange. Now he's hiding from me.
I'll never get used to that orange. I love the scarlet red myself.
There you go.
And I'm a Tar Heel. Like they say, if God ain't a Tar Heel, how come the sky's Carolina blue?
Oh, spare me. Oh, I'll let you go on anyway, Randy, because it's Christmas Eve.
Thank you, Hugh. I appreciate it. Merry Christmas, by the way, and congrats on your new gig in the afternoon.
Thank you, thank you.
I hope that the Gorka listeners don't have too much of a culture shock. If you have some of these rhino guests and stuff, it might really get their ire up.
I have done the afternoons before. I've been doing this since 1990. I am a conservative. I am the same guy. I don't think the MAGA people are different from me. I'm more MAGA than they are. They just don't know it. Go ahead.
Hey, cool. I wanted to ask you a lawyer question. All this talk about the press room and everything, I'm right on board with you and your callers and things that I've heard y'all say about it. It brings me back to when Trump kicked Bob Acostas out of the press room when he refused to give up the mic and he kind of snatched it from that girl's hand. They threw him out. A judge came forward and said, you can't do that. We've got these wacko judges out there that'll tie the hands of any kind of new regulations. What could they do about it, you as a lawyer?
Well, I am forgetting that incident. Not saying it didn't happen. I don't remember it. But I am here to tell you, I was the White House counsel in charge of drafting the first draft of the rules governing Lafayette Park. And it went up for review by Ricardo, who now runs the Cuban hot dog stand, and he said they were too restrictive. And so they sent, I got him wrong. They gave him to other smart people. Ricardo was always firing me, eating a hot dog, working on his putting, and in the office he was always saying, that's not good enough, we'll get somebody else. But I know that you can't have overly restrictive rules. They've got to be content neutral. They've got to be viewpoint neutral. It's not hard to run a press corps, but you got to find qualified professionals without regard to their viewpoint, without regard to their content that they produce, except on a professional level, on a quality level. We got to get rid of the bozos who didn't notice that the President of the United States is not mentally competent. Thank you, Randy. I want to remind everyone, if you want to go to the inauguration, you don't have a ticket, we do have a contest. Just text the name Trump, T-R-U-M-P, to 94878. 94878. Text Trump to 94878. You might win the trip to the inauguration. You might win a trip to the inaugural ball. And you will not win if you do not enter. Text Trump. We're going to pay for everything. Salem Media is not me. 94878. 94878. Just text Trump to that and join the campaign or the contest. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas Eve plan ahead. That you gather with family and friends. That you celebrate the birth of the Christ child in your own fashion, in my tradition. The Roman Catholic tradition, there is midnight mass. And this is sort of a great test of non-Catholics on entering a Catholic family. How do they do at midnight mass? Fetching Mrs. Hewitt went to Warren, Ohio in 1981. We got married in 6 months later, but she spent Christmas in Warren. And we went to midnight mass. And that year we went to St. James because it was bigger than Blessed Sacrament. And it was way below zero. It was not zero. It was way below zero. But we went to midnight mass. My Presbyterian father and my Presbyterian wife, buckled up, and they went outside. And it was so cold. Then when we got home, the fetching Mrs. Hewitt went up to her room and she said, "I'm done. I'm frozen." Well, of course, the party's just getting started in a Catholic house. You really can't drink before Mass. So everyone came home and poured themselves a great helper to warm themselves up, and they began to talk. And it is, of course, also a Catholic thing to stay awake until about 4 o'clock in the morning, no matter if there's small children involved or not, and then to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to open presents. So Christmas is really kind of a gauntlet for non-Catholics that you got to get through. So if you are a non-Catholic and you're going home to meet the in-laws and they're Catholic, get a nap. All I can tell you is get a nap and drink a lot of water and understand no one's going to bed after Mass. That's the starting gun. That's the Catholic way. If you're Italian Catholic, God love you, you'd better like fish. Because Selena Zito right now is cooking up fish for everybody. The 17 Fishes Day, or whatever they call it in Yinzerland, that's underway. But, good Irish Catholics, they just bring the booze. And the priests come over at about 1:30 in the morning. They're done. They've closed up shop. And they're going door to door. And the police are not going to arrest a priest. They're going to help him get home. And so I'm just here to tell you, if you're going to a Roman Catholic house, remember, midnight mass is great. It is festive. It is wonderful. It is beautiful. And then the party starts. You don't go to bed. It's a warning. Take a nap. Mary in Sarasota, Florida, 1-800-520-1234, connection to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hello, Mary.
Hello there, Mr. Hewitt. First time, I just wanted to tell you that you have gotten us through such a terrible stretch there, and I'm glad you came out of Switzerland, showed us what spying is all about, and really appreciate you, Dwayne, the crew, and all of your wonderful guests.
Not Dwayne. Not Dwayne. Adam and Harley, maybe, but not Dwayne. That's a maniacal laugh. That's very Dwayne-like. You're probably related to him. He's gone already. Can we get a picture of his studio? He's gone. He did his My PhD weight loss thing, and now he's gone. All right, I got to go talk to Gino. Hey, thank you, Mary. God bless you. Gino in Erie, Pennsylvania. Hi, Gino.
How's it going, Hugh?
I'm great.
Hey, it's called the Seven Fishes. Bon Natale. What's the matter?
No, it's 17. I think it's 17. I think you're a Yinzer and you're ill-informed.
No, it's the Seven Fishes. I don't know, 17. Maybe you were drinking and you thought you heard 17.
No, Selena, I look at Selena's table and I think I know it's Seven Fishes. I know, but.
Right. Hey, just wishing everybody a Merry Christmas. The 20th can't come soon enough. And hopefully one day we'll know who's making these decisions in the White House for the whole 4 years.
No one is ever going to write the book that should be written because nobody's going to want to end up in a garbage bag buried at the end zone at New York Giants Stadium. Exactly. Really, it's just not going to happen. But thank you for the call. I will do more about Relief Factor. Normally I talk to you about Relief Factor right now, but I ran out of time because I poorly timed that segment and call, so I will do it next hour or next segment. Out a little bit overnight. There's a little white stuff out there, slippery, on the way to the studio. I'm here to tell you, though, that I have an idea for Saturday Night Live. If you are connected to the writer room, give it to them. All right. I don't know who plays Corinne Jean-Pierre, but whoever plays Corinne Jean-Pierre ought to open the skit. They've got the White House podium there. They said, hello, and everyone will know that it's a skit about Corinne Jean-Pierre, but it's not really. She just said, I'm tired of you people. I'm taking the day off, and I'm calling in a substitute, a backup quarterback, a backup press, and it's not John Kirby. And then let me introduce you to press secretary for a day, and out walks John Lovitz. Now, I don't know.
That's it, ticket.
Yeah, that's the guy. Play
Yeah,
it.
that's it, ticket.
That's the ticket. So John Lovitz walks out, and of course, most of the Saturday Night Live audience will recognize him. Some won't. I don't know if he's big with Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Harley, do you know who John Lovitz is?
I can't say I do.
You don't. You don't know the bit? Play a little bit of the bit, Adam.
Yeah, that's it, ticket.
That's all. That's it. He's a liar, and that's what he does. He's sort of like Joe Azuzu was a con man that they made a car ad out of, and then John Lovitz picked up the bit. Yeah, that's the ticket. That's it. So they bring out John Lovitz, and someone pretending to be a reporter said, "Can you tell us why the three people on death row who are still on death row are different from the other three?" And John Lovitz would say, "They're terrorists." Yeah, that's it. That's the ticket. They're terrorists. And then someone would point out that the Philadelphia drug dealer ordered the murder of children in a house and terrorized the neighborhood. He said, they were terrorists outside of Philadelphia. That's it. That's the ticket. You got the idea. And then someone would say, is President Biden in charge? And John Lovitz would say, he's sort of in charge. He's kind of in charge. He comes into the office. Yeah, that's the ticket. He comes into the office. He's on top of everything. He's putting together the ship behind the door. He's working on model airplanes. That's whatever it is that they would have him say. John Lovitz is funny. I once went and saw John Lovitz in the desert in Southern California. It was kind of unusual because he's an NC-17 comic. Not on TV, but in person, pretty blue, as they say. But his aunt and uncle were there. John Lovett's about my age, I would guess. So his aunt and uncle are probably at the time Joe Biden's age. And he's looking at it and he said, I'd like to welcome my aunt and uncle. Sort of. And then he says, I'm very sorry for what you're about to hear. And then he would apologize to them throughout because he would be using inappropriate off-color humor. And it was very funny because you never think about comics having to have their aunt and uncle in the audience when they're doing their routines, which might be a little bit or a lot off-color. All right, I want to go back to a special report last night because some of you are just tuning in, may have missed it. We talked about the pardon last night. Not the pardon, the commutations of the 37. And Brett came to me first, cut number 5.
Okay, Hugh, thoughts?
It was an outrageous and an incoherent abuse of presidential power, Brett. The victims' families will be heard from, I hope, in the coming days. But there is no coherent distinguishing between the 37 murderers, and they were very awful crimes, and the 3 that President Biden left on death row. Now, I doubt the president is competent. I really do not believe he's in a position to sign anything except his own resignation. But if he is going to defend what this outrageous act is, he ought to come out and take questions on it. There are Department of Justice regulations that allow for victims to be heard. They were not followed. It's an abuse of power, and the collapse of his reputation continues apace. Now, when Pam Bondi becomes the Attorney General, I would like to have a report from her on whether or not the pardon attorney was involved in this process. There is an office of the pardon attorney at the Department of Justice. There always has been. It is often bypassed on the last day or last hours of a presidency when political pardons are issued. Or if you're Bill Clinton, you're issuing pardons to donors like Ivan Boesky. And you're just shameless about it. You're doing it for money. God knows what they're going to do in this White House. They might hold an auction. I would not be surprised if they held an auction. They just went online and we're going to do a pardon. We didn't raise enough money for the Biden Library, and nobody wants to be associated with it, so we're going to auction pardons. And, by the way, not illegal. Pardon power is absolute. He could do it. It's been done before, just not out in the open. But given the shamelessness with which they are operating, why not? Why not just say, look, presidential libraries are expensive. They cost $100 million, sometimes $200 million. It's not like the old days. We built the Nixon Library for $20 million, but that was 1989-90. So, the Obama shrine is going up on the south side of Chicago, and they're not even putting the papers there. I think it's costing $200 million. I don't know. But it's fine. They can raise money. It's not for profit. But, they could hold an auction for pardons. It's as coherent as this. He would be as aware of that as he is of this. And you'll never persuade me other than that. Unless he goes to the press room today and says, I'm going to talk to you about, I've got the particular case here. I'm going to talk to you about why we charge Luigi Mangione with the death penalty, why I did not commute the sentence of Sanarov or the killers of Mother Emanuel or of the Tree of Life killer. I'm going to explain to you how Mr. Savage, the Philadelphia drug lord who killed 12 people, including children, I'm going to explain to you why he's different from Tsarnaev or Roof or any of the other mass murderers. And I'm going to explain to you my very complicated reasoning that will require a law review length expression of detail as to why these 37 got a commutation and these 3 didn't. If he does that, I will retract everything. But of course he's not going to do that because he can't do that. He can't be left alone. And they're letting him commute sentences. And Kamala Harris, by the way, she wants to run for governor of California. Why would you believe anything she says when she runs for governor of California? We now know, the Wall Street Journal has confirmed, that she has known, and everyone has known, for years, that Joe Biden does not have it. That's the worst look of Kamala ever. And that's sort of like her version of the last press conference that Nixon gave after he lost the 1962 California governor's race. But she's going to run for governor in California. She doesn't have a chance. She can't possibly get the nomination in 4 years. She might win in California. It's the dumbest state. It is, without question, the dumbest state. And we know that by virtue of the fact people live there and pay 14.5% of their income, and they tolerate homelessness on a scale that is industrial. And they don't do anything about it. They vote Democratic. So she's going to win. But one wonders when she runs, is she ever going to say anything, or is anyone going to ask her? Maybe the Golden State Press Corps, it doesn't really exist anymore because the LA Times is a shadow of itself. It has Pat Morrison and nothing else. That's it. And so I don't know what they'll ask when she runs, and I don't know that she'll answer anything. It's going to be fabulous. I cannot wait for her to run for governor of California. Merry Christmas to you. Christmas came early for me. The Cavaliers won last night, and they are 26-4. I can't even believe that. That's probably the best start in franchise history, and they can't keep that up, right? But then I looked at the stat sheet because I wasn't up for the game. I'm just astonished by this. But that's not what I'm talking about. I went over thinking to myself, it's Christmas Eve. None of my favorite podcasters are going to be working. And therefore, I'm going to be podcast less for my exercise. But turns out that my podcasters are pretty reliable. Now, Commentary Magazine is using the ruse of best ubs, and that's okay. They got to take a week off, too. Hanukkah's tomorrow. But I've got a new Wine and Gold talk by Chris Fedor and Ethan Sands. That's good news. And I've got a brand new Buckeye talk and a brand new Kings of the North. Those are 3 sports pods, which are pretty good. Good to work with. But Vic Mattis and Mary Catherine Ham put out a new Getting Hammered, which is going to be very amusing because I can't imagine Mary Catherine has 5 seconds of time on her hand because she has 4 children. More important, though, than anything, the band got together. The fellas played a set yesterday, a 2-hour Ruthless podcast that dropped 3 hours ago. Now, if you've never listened to Ruthless, I want you to know it's NC-17. But you will learn more about everything from those 4 fellas that's real than you will from the entire White House press corps, save Ducey and Heinrich. And Steve Holland does a good job. I like Steve a lot. Just the facts, man. But If you go to Ruthless, you'll actually find out what's going on. And they're going to go at it for 2 hours today. That is Christmas coming early. Thank you to the fellas. Like and subscribe. You should like and subscribe. Highly Concentrated Hugh and Dwayne's World and Getting Hammered and everything else that I mentioned. But definitely Ruthless. AndrewandTodd.com are great, great sponsors of this program. They will be going with me to the afternoon. They're so happy because now people from east to west, no matter what hour I put their plug in, will hear them, and they'll know that if they're going to get a mortgage, do it with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, because AndrewandTodd.com are bankers. They lend you the money. They underwrite the loan. Now, some of you, the last thing in the world you're thinking about is buying a house, but some of you are thinking about buying a house because you know it's actually the best week in the world to buy a house because the people who are really trying to sell their house right now have got to move. Otherwise, who lists the house during Christmas week between now and New Year's? It's a great week to look at houses. But get pre-approved for your mortgage. Call Andrew and Todd at 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. And take it to the bank. They will get it done if it is doable. They will get you the best rate. Although inflation is stubborn, Joe Biden has completely screwed that up too, or the people around him. And it's going to take a while for Trump to straighten that out, but he will. And you're going to buy a house in the new year. You're going to close in the new year, but lock the rate in now. If it goes down, you can refi or lower it. 888-888-1172. And if you are at wit's end and you're a senior, 62 years old, and you're living in your house, and it's a grim Christmas because you can't make ends meet because of the 20% plus inflation of the last 4 years, think about a reverse mortgage in the new year. You can call Andrew and Todd today, 888-888-1172, and say, explain it to me. Please do. I'm open. And talk loud because I can't hear it. They'll do that. They'll take as long as it takes. Special message for seniors, 888-888-1172. I want to close my program by thanking all of you who have participated this Christmas season in getting Christmas cheer to children. You can still help. The banner for Angel Tree is over at HughHewitt.com. And if you've been meaning to do it, do it. Right? If you made a mental resolution to follow through, follow through. Let's get the list up. We've raised almost $500,000, and I'm very grateful to this audience across all the Salem platforms. I really do thank you year in and year out. I do 3 or 4 different drives a year. We do a couple of Semper Fi Fund shows. But it's always Prison Fellowship, Angel Tree at Christmas, and Prison Fellowship camping in the summer. That's what I do because those kids have got nobody else except you, and you come through with them for them every year, and I thank you. That is genuinely the spirit of Christmas, is to go and do that. Now, I don't know if you're going to watch Love Actually tonight or if you're going to watch any of the traditional, I don't know, you name it. You can be a Rudolph person. You can be a Charlie Brown special. Larry O'Connor is going to be here tomorrow with his special on Fisher House. But we're going to watch Christmas Vacation if we watch anything because I am still new. I've not seen it. And if I have to go through another year of Christmas Vacation references without understanding that Aunt Bethany was just showing us the way for Joe Biden, I will go crazy. So I'm going to watch that today. Drive safely wherever you're going. Stay chill. Remember, the joy of Christmas is the arrival of the Christ child and nothing else. Be satisfied with what you have. Take your time. Relax. Wave people ahead of you. Let them cut in. Don't get upset. Help people with their packages. Joyous Noel.